Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, air, restoration, and flood services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit BillHowe.com. And by the Conrad Trebas Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Another attempt to see what's happening inside a controversial immigrant detention center. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Two of San Diego's congressional representatives visited the core civic facility in Otay Mesa today. KPBS reporter Katie Anastas says they didn't speak to detainees during the visit.
Representatives Mike Levin and Sarah Jacobs visited a holding area, medical facilities, library, and chapel.
There's roughly 1,000, little more, 1,000 ICE detainees in there. They are grouped by color and by severity of their offense. Most are nonviolent.
They met with the facility's lead doctor and other medical staff. Levin describes the facility and cleanliness as being roughly on par with civilian medical facilities.
I believe that they're doing the best that they can with the staff that they have in the circumstances that they find themselves in.
Levin and Jacobs say they've received complaints about the facility, including about access to medication. Levin says staff told him that if someone misses 3 doses of medication, staff follow up with them.
The last time I was here, I spoke with one of our constituents at length, and it backs up pretty much everything. He was getting the medication that he needed. The food was not great, but it also was edible. Eating the same thing over and over again is not going to be the best.
Jacobs says her office had requested to speak with detainees today, but that a miscommunication between federal officials and the facility meant it didn't happen on schedule.
They finally offered it right at the very end when we had 10 minutes left. And so we've let them know that we will plan on coming back to meet with folks because we do think it's really important to hear from the people directly who are in here what they're experiencing.
Jacobs and Levin say they plan to conduct unannounced oversight visits in the coming months.
It's hard to know exactly how much of the preparation, the cleanliness, the way that we just saw things operating this morning, how much of that was for us versus how much is the standard ordinary course of how they conduct business day in and day out. That's why it's important that in addition to the tour that we just took, which we had announced in advance, that we come unannounced.
California Senator Alex Padilla was denied access to the detention center during an unannounced visit in February. Katie Anastas, KPBS News.
It has been a busy few days for immigration coverage. Yesterday, local religious leaders held a Holy Week demonstration outside of San Diego's federal courthouse. It's part of our ongoing coverage of racial justice and social equity by reporter Katie Hyson. Find more of her work at kpbs.org and the KPBS YouTube page. Another high-ranking member of President Trump's cabinet is out of a job. Today, Pam Bondi was fired as Attorney General. Karen Cava has reactions to the latest departure from the president's inner circle.
President Trump, in a statement on Truth Social, described Pam Bondi as a great American patriot and a loyal friend, but he offered no specific reason as to why she had been ousted from her role as U.S. Attorney General. Bondi is now the second Trump cabinet member ousted in recent weeks after Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was fired last month. Sources said the president recently ramped up conversations with allies about firing Bondi and had what one source described as a tough conversation with Bondi about her future on Wednesday. Among Trump's frustrations with Bondi, according to sources, he felt she hadn't investigated or prosecuted enough of his political opponents and was displeased with her handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files. In his statement, the president added that Bondi would be, quote, transitioning to a much needed and important new job in the private sector. Republican Congressman Thomas Massie, who found himself at odds with Trump as he led Capitol Hill efforts to release the Epstein documents, a push Trump initially opposed, wrote on social media Thursday, "I support Trump firing Pam Bondi. I hope the next AG will release all the Epstein files according to the law and follow up with investigations, prosecutions, and arrests." Some congressional Democrats expressed sharp criticism of Bondi's tenure. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer wrote, "Good riddance." Others wondering what's next.
I think it is a win that she is no longer in this job. Now, who comes next, who could be even more of a sycophant, we will see. But I also think, I hope, this is the beginning of a trend here, sort of a breaking of the dam. We've seen Secretary Noem out, now the Attorney General out.
Bondi will be replaced for now by Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. Trump said Blanche served as Trump's defense attorney for some of the criminal cases that Trump faced during the time in between his 2 presidential terms. Blanche also was a federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York before he went into private practice. In Washington, I'm Karen Kafa.
I'm Amna Nawaz. Tonight on the NewsHour, President Trump fires Pam Bondi as Attorney General. That's coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Did you know Chula Vista has an official tall ship? The city's mayor calls it a cherished landmark and a cultural asset. KPBS reporter Jacob Ayer says it came very close to sailing off into city history, but for now she'll stay docked in South Bay.
Her double masts stretch more than 100 feet above the Safe Harbor South Bay Marina.
This is the historic schooner Bill of Rights.
On deck, Navy Sea Cadets learn about seafaring aboard the 137-foot-long vessel inspired by an America's Cup schooner from 1858. But the Bill of Rights is quite a bit newer.
She was launched in 1971 in Bristol, Maine.
Don Johnson is the captain.
Our prime focus is youth training. And today we have U.S. Navy Sea Cadets.
Johnson says the Bill of Rights has called Chula Vista home for over a decade, offering sailing adventures, day charters, and educational programs.
We also take out junior Navy ROTC, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and other youth groups.
The learning happens above decks and below decks.
Okay, so in here, A compartment, we sleep 16 in this space here.
The ship is owned by the nonprofit South Bayfront Sailing Association. Johnson is the association's president. His wife Susan manages the finances and bookings for the ship in an office at the marina.
We consider this an asset for the community. A tall ship has been in the community since the marina was bought.
They say it's a volunteer-run operation. Revenues from the programs and some donations help pay rent in the harbor. But the Johnsons have dealt with some rough seas in recent weeks. They say last month they got a lease termination notice from Safe Harbor Marinas, the private company that runs the marina in Chula Vista. The Johnsons say they weren't given a reason.
When we got the letter, it was like a punch in the gut. In the first place, there really is no other slip to park the vessel properly.
Safe Harbor says their agreement permitted them to terminate the lease on 30 days' notice, and they chose to exercise that right. News about the notice prompted an online petition. It also drew the attention of local elected officials. Chula Vista Mayor John McCann sent KPBS a statement saying he hoped to work with all stakeholders to find a way for the Bill of Rights to keep her berth. And now Safe Harbor Marinas seems to be reversing course. In a statement of its own, the company says the Bill of Rights will remain docked at Safe Harbor South Bay and that the Sailing Association could disregard the notice of termination. Safe Harbor says they will do everything they can to help and support the schooner Bill of Rights. They say they're changing course in recognition of the current constraints on alternative options for the Bill of Rights. Susan Johnson says she's hopeful they'll be able to continue their programs, but they still need to figure out the details of what comes next.
We just got that they were canceling the letter, but they were going to work with us on rebirthing the boat, which means that they will, in my mind, it means that they will work on coming up with a place for us to berth and a contract. But there's nothing promised in it.
As details get ironed out, Susan says another group of Navy Sea Cadets will come aboard for training next week. She says the Bill of Rights will be busy with events through the end of September. Jacob Ayer, KPBS News.
A marine research institute is celebrating a major milestone today. It released its 3 millionth sea bass to the wild. It's part of a decade-long effort to restore and sustain California's fisheries. KPBS North County reporter Alexander Wynn was there for the momentous occasion.
Grab the net on the bottom. There you go.
Using a golden net, the ceremonial 3 millionth sea bass was released back to the ocean through this plastic tube that basically is a water slide for fish. Mark Drawbridge is the director for the Sustainable Seafood Program at Hub's SeaWorld Research Institute. That sea bass was hatched and raised here at the Institute Carlsbad campus.
Getting to 3 million has taken a fair amount of time. It's a fishery that has been depleted over time through overfishing and loss of habitat, climate change.
Between the 1960s and 80s, the white sea bass population plummeted. So in 1983, Hub's SeaWorld, the recreational fishing community, and the state's Department of Fish and Wildlife banded together to establish this program.
They play an important role in the ecosystem. They're found coastally here, around rocky reefs and in kelp beds and so forth.
We saw nature in action during the release. Half a dozen pelicans had a free lunch today, despite some efforts to keep them away. Typically, the fish are released through the sea pen in the middle of the lagoon here. This is the first time the Institute has used this method to release them.
But here we're trying to test different acclimation strategies to see how important we feel those acclimation cages actually are in the release process.
The fish is released through this pipe into the lagoon, and studies have shown that about 30% of the wild sea bass population is from this program.
Well, we ask for the fishermen, please save your hand, don't nature it.
Mariana Kawakami is the hatchery manager at Hub's SeaWorld. She says the Institute tags and tracks each fish released.
We can get information, which batch came from, when was raised, how was released, where was released, and where was captured.
The Institute is one of the few marine fish hatcheries in the U.S. dedicated to research and replenishment of fish populations. It releases about 70,000 fish per year. Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
Well, we have a warm night on our hands. We've had some very warm nights lately, but daytime weather cooler than it had been. We're getting ready for a warm-up this weekend. The bigger headline in the short term is the wind. We're going to be breezy. Ramona 44 tonight, Mount Laguna 42. And wind advisories are in effect, both in effect this evening, then we get a break, and then they do return actually during the day on Friday. For inland portions, far inland portions of San Diego County, most of Orange County as well. So we'll talk about this and a weekend warm-up coming up.
Well, get ready because some of the biggest sporting events in the world are coming to Southern California. Starting this week, people are reserving their spots for a chance to buy tickets to the 2028 Summer Olympics. While the games will mostly be held in the LA area, San Diego will play a prominent role when it comes to soccer. Nearly a dozen men's and women's matches will be held at Snapdragon Stadium, including bronze medal games. Random drawings are being held for tickets in the days ahead, starting with pre-registered local residents. People will be notified of their designated time slots by email. And for those who can't wait until 2028, the World Cup is coming to the United States in just a couple of months. It won't be cheap, though, to attend. FIFA is raising prices for a number of games, including the final set for July 19th in New Jersey. A single ticket will now cost more than $10,000 for the most expensive tier. This week, we reported on changes to CalFresh food benefits for immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers. Changes are also coming to the SNAP program in many other states, restricting what can be bought with those funds. Lee Waldman explains the new rules.
Families can't purchase things like Gatorade for kids' sports, trail mix for healthy but kid-friendly snacks, or candy for a diabetic sugar crash.
Amber O'Connor at Every Texan, a nonprofit organization focused on public policy, is worried for the 3.5 million people on SNAP in Texas over changes to what's covered.
We're rolling something out as a testing and proving ground for bad policy that hurts vulnerable Texans.
Texas is one of 22 states that has sought a SNAP food restriction waiver from the USDA. Later this month, Florida and Colorado's changes will go into effect. The waivers restrict the purchase of non-nutritious items to ensure that taxpayer dollars provide nutritious options that improve health outcomes within SNAP. SNAP retailers in many of these states will now have notices to help consumers understand what's covered. But Gina Pallotta-Nino at the Food Research and Action Center fears there will still be confusion.
It's going to cause a lot of confusion. It's going to cause a lot of shame and stigma, and people not knowing why items they could have purchased beforehand are no longer eligible.
A 2025 report from 3 industry trade groups estimated that implementing SNAP restrictions would cost retailers $1.6 billion up front. A financial loss that could discourage grocers from participating in SNAP.
The former dietary guidelines said that in order for people to have a healthy diet, they needed to be able to shop and afford the food where they live, where they went to school, and where they gather. None of those things are being met.
In New York, I'm Lee Waldman.
Well, we've had some warm nights and not as warm when it comes to the daytime weather compared to where we were during that big heat wave. It's been windy, though, a breezy end to the week, especially in inland areas. We'll show you the wind advisories here in a few seconds. There is a big warming trend into the weekend, but we're not going to achieve record highs like we were time and time again in the month of March. So warmer, but not record warmth. And showers will be returning later next week. Tonight down to 58 degrees, kind of a warmer night, partly cloudy, some clouds especially lurking near the coastline. But you'll notice not just this evening, but then again tomorrow, wind advisories in effect. So off and on late this week, the bulk of Friday will feature wind advisories during the day in the inland portions of San Diego County up to the North Orange counties in on some of this as well. So it's going to be windiest in the canyons and passes, breezy here into San Diego and dry locally. Pretty good chillier air across big air mass of colder air across the central Rockies and into the plains, but also some volatile weather there on the east side of a front, producing severe storms for some in the central U.S. But overall for us, pretty decent weather aside from the wind, and with that, the inherent fire danger is often present. On Friday, we'll be around 75 in San Diego, 80 in Ramona, 82 Borrego Springs, but 52 up in the mountains there into Mount Laguna. There's a big warm-up this weekend, though, turning warmer again. The orange is back on the map. It won't be as windy, but it will be very warm, and a warm Easter Sunday as well across the board here. So warm, but not record warmth. So it's a significant warm up here as a big ridge builds across the west for now. Strengthening high pressure. It's just not the mega ridge that we experienced through much of March with the record heat. So as we take a look at some local forecasts here, coastal areas, we're going to warm up to around 80 for the coast on Saturday, still 74 Sunday, not bad. So from Good Friday through Easter Sunday, it looks really pleasant out there. Temperatures do back off a bit into the middle part of next week. Let's go a little bit inland here. We're going to go up to 86 on Saturday, very warm and partly sunny. 81 for Easter Sunday. Temps hedge back down into the 70s on a pleasant Monday and Tuesday. Let's get into the mountains. Here we're windiest into the day Friday, so that's where the winds are strongest. Somewhat cool here, temps in the 50s. We're going to warm up here a little bit more into next week. And then into the deserts. Here we have temperatures surging into the upper 80s. Remember, we did peak in the upper 90s to near 100 plus in some spots last month. So this is warm and a little bit warmer into Tuesday, but not as steamy as it had been. I'm AccuWeather meteorologist Jeff Cornish for KPBS News.
The next 10 days will be crucial for America's goal of returning humans to the moon. After a successful launch, the crew of Artemis 2 is working toward entering the moon's orbit. Brian Abel has an update from NASA's latest mission.
We circled it completely, and we forgot how beautiful it is to look down on Earth.
What a view for the 4-astronaut crew of NASA's Artemis 2. Safely into space after a successful launch of its historic mission.
And liftoff. The crew of Artemis 2 now bound for the moon.
Before they get to their lunar destination, though, a series of maneuvering tests of their chariot, the Orion spacecraft. Then, a decision point this evening to boldly go where no one has gone before or not.
That puts us outbound to the moon. That's a real big commit point.
If they do choose to continue, the roughly 6-minute translunar injection burn will increase Orion's velocity by about 900 miles per hour, propelling the capsule out of Earth's orbit toward the moon. Then slingshotting it around our closest universal neighbor, where the crew will be in a space league of their own.
They're going much farther than the other crews have before. So this is really uncharted territory. It's really important because we've never been to that part. So you don't want to go somewhere you've never been. You don't know what the craters are like. So it's basically charting your way before you actually want to get there and land.
The mission testing our capacity for deeper exploration while inspiring a whole new generation.
I can't wait to see what this generation, the Artemis generation, drives from it.
In Washington, Brian Abel, KPBS News.
Absolutely amazing. And when Artemis 2 returns to Earth, the crew will splash down off the coast of San Diego. Local Navy will be there to safely bring them back to shore. And it's a job that they've trained years for. Tonight, we have a story from the KPBS Evening Edition archive. Here's military reporter Andrew Dyer from 2023 with more on the special partnership with NASA.
When the crew of NASA's Orion spacecraft splash down in the Pacific Ocean next year after circling the moon, it will be San Diego Navy crews recovering the spacecraft and the astronauts inside. It will be the second flight of NASA's new Artemis program and the first to carry astronauts. Although it won't land there just yet, it will also be the first time humans have been to the moon since the final Apollo mission in 1972.
So the Artemis mission is all about going back to the moon and staying on the moon.
NASA's Lily Villarreal is the landing and recovery director for the Artemis II mission. It's her job to help coordinate with both the Navy and the Air Force in recovering Orion and its crew. Over the last week, NASA officials tested the recovery process from the San Diego-based amphibious transport dock John P. Murtha. Coronado-based Navy divers with expertise in decompression practiced recovering Orion's crew, with sailors subbing in for the astronauts, who have yet to train for recovery.
NASA couldn't do this without the partnership of the DoD. We just definitely don't have the assets, the capability, and the global reach that the Navy and the DoD helps us with.
Senior Chief Ryan Kreider is the Command Master Diver for EOD Expeditionary Support Unit 1 in Coronado. His sailors are training alongside air crews from a North Island helicopter squadron for next year's recovery mission.
So we handle everything on the open water.
EOD sailors will make contact with the capsule after splashdown, assess the astronauts, and help guide them to a helicopter to transport back to a ship. The capsule itself will be recovered by one of the several amphibious transport docks based in San Diego.
We know how to handle a lot of unpredictable situations, and we know how to handle them with calm and ease.
Artemis II will circle the moon in 2024. Then, with Artemis III in 2025, NASA plans to land astronauts on the moon for the first time in more than half a century. Andrew Dyer, KPBS News.
Another way to find stories from the KPBS archive is KPBS Plus. It's our new streaming service featuring a deep backlog of news and other content. And there's plenty to choose from, with KPBS now celebrating its 65th year of public media in San Diego. After a 4-month closure for infrastructure improvements, Torrey Pines State Natural Reserve has fully reopened. Some of the more popular areas are an easy and well-known destination today, but the history of Torrey Pines goes back to a time when the journey to get there was an exotic one. Here's Ken Kramer.
1920s, road trips were the thing, and cars like the Model T were the way to get there. Driving from LA to San Diego was a real adventure, especially along one very challenging stretch of highway. See it on this old map, the Torrey Pines Grade. That hill your car had to climb to come down the coast to San Diego a century ago, you can still drive it, though far more people walk up Torrey Pines Park Road from the State Beach. Same road. And just imagine, it was a real struggle for cars back then. For one thing, they'd stall. See, the Model T had what they called a gravity-fed fuel system. Gasoline came from the gas tank to the engine in the front, and if you were climbing the Torrey Pines Grade and your tank wasn't full, oh no, the gas didn't get up there to the engine and you stalled. The answer was to drive in reverse. No kidding, back up all the way to the top until you reached here. The Torrey Pines Lodge. And let me tell you, by the time you got up here, your car needed a break and you needed a beer. Opened in February of 1923, its design was inspired by the Hopi Indian houses of the Arizona desert. Inside was a restaurant where you could dine on the terrace and enjoy the piney ocean air and see the coastal fog from which these rare trees drew moisture. The Torrey Pine Tree really is uniquely San Diego, found only here along our coast and on Santa Rosa Island off Santa Barbara. Indigenous peoples and settlers knew about the tree, of course, but it's named for Dr. John Torrey, a medical doctor, botanist, and expert on trees and flowers of North America who was from New York. So he never saw them, never came out here and actually laid eyes on them himself. No, it was one of his admirers, Charles C. Perry, on a scientific expedition in 1850 who identified a new species of pine growing in sheltered places on bluffs above the ocean. And he sent some samples to Dr. Torrey, and he said he wanted to name the tree after him. So it might have been a Perry pine, but it's a Torrey pine, and there you are. Today, the historic Torrey Pines Lodge is a ranger station and visitor center that preserves relics of that time when perspiring automobiles and tourist buses made their way up the grade so their eager occupants might walk the trails and see trees to be found almost nowhere else on Earth. Refreshed, restored, and maybe inspired, motorists of a century ago could continue on their way to San Diego. This part of the road today isn't open to cars anymore, but it still goes a ways beyond the lodge, straight and level, and built of cement and local sand and seashells dating back to the days of Warren Harding. And along the way, there is a plaque and an informational marker with just a few pictures to tell the story of the old road you're walking on. Just a reminder, please, of the Model T days when the Torrey Pines grade was something to be reckoned with, and the Torrey Pines Lodge was your reward for having done so. Lasting bits of history both about San Diego.
Another great history lesson there by Ken Kramer. And by the way, he has a half hour of stories every week about San Diego, and you can see them Thursday nights at 8 o'clock right here on KPBS. Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom, NPR's Morning Edition. We'll have more on the departure of Pam Bondi as U.S. Attorney General and what this means for the ongoing disclosures of the Epstein files. And KPBS Roundtable will have a discussion with local reporters covering some of the recent headlines in North County. That airs at noon on KPBS FM. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, air, restoration, and flood services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Previs Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.